This is Kevin Scott, one of the writers of Star Wars The High Republic, and I'm on Team Nerd Herd. And I've forgotten what the phrase is.
What up, nerds? Happy May 4th to you all. This is Alonzo, aka Comics and Pops, here with another episode of Movies and Shows, where we are going to review the New Mutants movie on HBO Max. And that's kind of weird, right? And I have a special guest with me today. I have Mike The Beast Bendtsen. How's it going, Mike?
Not too bad, my friend. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to get into this.
All right. And just a couple shout outs for the people that are hanging out with us today. Something Wong, what is going on, dude? Thank you for being first, as always, dude. Appreciate that. And Streetside Anthony, what's going on? Thanks for coming on our show. And let's just get into it. So, before we get into the review, let us talk about New Mutants, the comic. So we all know that New Mutants itself had a nice run. Specifically, though, we're going to be looking at New Mutants number 18 through 20, which is the first appearance of the Demon Bear, and which Fox or Marvel DC, not Marvel DC, Disney, used to kind of build that plot. So the comic itself, I mean, it was amazing. I mean, you look at it, I mean, you had Chris Claremont on that. You had Bill Sienkiewicz. Art, it was phenomenal. I mean, it was so adult because when New Mutants first came out, I mean, they played it safe. It was a lot of like real, like kid-like stories up until the point of Demon Bear, where it was more adult. So you saw these kids kind of grow up, or the story changed and got into something that's a lot more adult themed, and it was fantastic. I mean, we look at Demon Bear, that Demon Bear saga, and there is a lot of emotional strife. There's just a lot of this like depth to these characters that we didn't get to see before, and they really brought it out. So going into this movie, I had really high expectations. But before I get into my portion of it, Mike, let us know what you thought of the movie. I mean, how did you feel about it?
Going into it, I was excited because I'm a big horror guy. I've said that in some of my videos, and obviously a big comic book fan. And I knew... See, I never read the New Mutants. I've always been a big X-Men fan, but I never read the New Mutants, so I didn't know much going into it. I didn't even know Illyana was part of it. I knew she was Colossus' sister, but I never knew she became a more prominent in the comic books. But just with my love of horror, love of comic books, when I saw that first trailer, it feels like decades ago. I was so on board because it was different. And I love the MCU. I'm also a DC fan, but with any prior to anything I've seen before, I was like, this is going to be different. I'm all on board. And I know this cast, a lot of this cast is very talented. Anya Taylor-Joy, Maisie Williams, and Charlie Heaton, I knew those off the bat from Game of Thrones, Stranger Things, and Anya Taylor-Joy. I forgot Split had come out yet, but I knew her from The Witch. And that's a whole nother story about how I feel about that movie, but she was great in it. So I was pumped with the cast members I knew, and I was very excited to get into this world, and I'll say after watching the movie, it made me want to start, because I never read the comics. It made me want to get into the New Mutants. And I was telling you off before we went live that during the pandemic, I got Marvel Unlimited, and my first goal was start FF, Spidey, and the X-Men from the Silver Age, from their debuts. So I was going through that, but now after this movie, I'm like, you know what? I'm all in on New Mutants. I want to check it out, and now I can see how much really was pulled from the source material and what was, what creative liberties were taken. But yeah, that's
no. I was about to say that's great to hear that this movie really drew you into like New Mutants, and again, something that you weren't like thinking about or ever really wanting to read or to pick. I mean, I'm happy that this movie did it. I mean, I think that's what this movie did for a lot of people. Because the movie itself, I thought, was really well done. It's completely different from the source material, but they kept a lot of the horror aspects, which was really nice. And I felt that, watching the movie, I was like, you know what? It's still staying true with the themes of that Demon Bear saga. And again, there were some liberties here and there and some nuances, but overall, I felt like it was a nice update from how from the source material.
Awesome. And when I read reviews after, because as soon as I finish a movie, I go straight to articles, I go straight to YouTube reviews, and some of the reviewers were saying, what you just said. So once again, it's just more like fuel to make me get back, get into the New Mutants, and I'm really looking forward to checking those out.
I know, and I'm really looking forward, for you to read like New Mutants 18 through 20. I know you're starting from the beginning, which is fantastic because it's laying that groundwork. But when you get to that, I mean, you're gonna be like, oh my God, this is like so good. And it was. I mean, that whole Demon Bear really made those characters like stand out. I mean, these weren't just like, oh, they're little X babies, they're not part of the X-Men. They're just kind of, I don't even know what they were, So that's really great to hear. So Mike, tell me, who was your standout? I mean, which character did you love the most in this movie?
That's such a good question. But if I was to pick one, I think I'd have to go Anya Taylor-Joy. Only because she steals it in the third act. And her accent, if not knowing her prior stuff, I would think, she was Russian, because she nailed that accent, in my opinion. And I really like what they did with kind of, and I'm sure some people weren't too crazy about it, but they kind of merged her with Kitty Pryde, where they gave her Lockheed, and she kind of used, and once again, I don't know a lot of her from the comics, so feel free to jump in or correct me, but so seeing how she kind of had the portals she was using, but when her and Daniel Moonstar got into that first fight in like the rec room, and you see the arm, her arm come out, and she's badass. And then seeing her fight Demon Bear, I thought that scene was awesome. But speaking of Daniel Moonstar, I thought she did really well, and I apologize I don't have the actress's name on the top of my head. But
Blue Hunt.
Yes. I thought she was cool because that's one character I had heard of Magic, but I didn't really know much about her. But out of that group of characters, I've heard Wolfsbane, I've heard Speedball, and not Human Torch, Sunspot, right?
Yeah, Sunspot and Cannonball. You know what? I totally agree with you, Mike. I thought that Anya Taylor-Joy, who you guys probably know from Queen's Gambit, and like you mentioned, The Witch, was phenomenal. She did steal the show. I loved what they did with Lockheed.
Same.
Oh my God. I totally dug it. My brother watched the movie as well, and he was just like, what is this puppet? I'm like, dude, it pays off. Just watch to the very end. It'll pay off. I mean, and he was like, dang. He enjoyed it. It was great. I mean, I felt they did the character justice. And again, I know they took a lot of liberties, but you're not going to get a straight translation of the comic book to film, because there's going to be a lot of campiness, and we really don't want that. We want things to be kind of grounded. And I did like Mirage, or as you mentioned, again, Mike, the character that Blue Hunt played. and how Danielle Moonstar was kind of like this broken character until she found herself, which it happened exactly like in the comic. So this was like it was really well done. Same thing with the relationship that happened between Danielle Moonstar and also Rain or Wolfsbane. Like, it was very organic. I didn't feel like they kind of put them together just for the sake of, putting them together. I thought it was really well done. And I think if they wanted to handle like relationships like that in movies going forward, I think they should follow that. I mean, it was just very natural. I felt like this is perfect. So Mike, which character didn't you like?
I'd probably have to go with the Doctor, but only because, and I know this, the whole saga with this movie before it even came to screens. So I don't know what was originally intended, but I thought she did a good job, but I thought they could have done just a little bit more explaining who she is and how she, how her power, who she is, her being a mutant, and how exactly her powers work per se. I kind of got the gist that she created the force field, but I didn't really know it was like from her powers. I kind of didn't know, and that might be from not knowing the source material. But so if I had to pick one, I'd pick her. But I thought she, I had no problems with how she delivered, how her performance I thought was good. But if one character I thought could have used a little bit more fleshing out, and I know you want to focus on the kids, which I thought they did, overall a pretty good job. I would have liked just a little bit more of her.
I agree with you there. I thought like the character Dr. Cecilia Reyes was going to be the mutant that we know. Instead, she wasn't. But I love the actress. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Queen of the South, which like Alex Braga's there, and she is awesome. Like, phenomenal actress, and she plays such a badass. She's cold and calculating, and she kind of brought a little bit of that. But to your point, like, it wasn't developed as much. The one character for me that I didn't like was Sunspot, because in the comic book, Sunspot he's arrogant. He doesn't think. He'll rush into danger without a plan. I mean, he's all like testosterone, I mean, he thinks, and he's like larger than life. And in the movie, he wasn't played like that. I felt that he was lacking a lot of that, like that energy, that also that kind of charisma that the comic book Sunspot had. And I mean, and it also too, I mean, he was scared. He was scared of his own mutant power, and he was scared of the demon bear. And I'm like, dude, this isn't the Sunspot that I know. I mean, this guy's like balls to the wall. I mean, he's getting in there, and I mean, he's the guy that you can depend on in a fight. And that's not what we got here. So again, I'm a little disappointed. I wish that they would have developed him a little bit more, or at least kind of make him like his counterpart in the comic books. I think that would have been more enjoyable for me to watch. But other than that, I mean, Mike, to your point, like the rest of the characters seemed like on point. They were developed rather well, considering you only have like an hour and a half or 2 hours, in a movie. So I totally get that. If you could change one thing about this movie, Mike, what would it be?
This kind of goes towards what they laid the seeds in, and granted, they might have had planned for sequels, and I heard there was a deleted post-credit scene, and they even started this groundwork back in Apocalypse, the from that current franchise, that series, and then in Deadpool 2, and I'm like, I knew of the post-credit scene that was deleted going into it. And then when Dr. Reyes talks about her superior, and then I'm like, oh, she's working for Mr. Sinister. And then you see the Essex name. And, I thought in X-Men's rogues, like they have their top three right off the bat are Magneto, Apocalypse, Mr. Sinister. It's like the trifecta for their big bads, amongst others. So I was kind of hoping, I was disappointed to hear that scene got cut because just even if it was for a second, to get that payoff that they started way back at the end of Apocalypse in the post-credit scene, and then you see the school Essex, which might have been where the New Mutants were going to be shipped off to if things went, Race's way. So that's a little kind of being a big, huge Mark fanboy of the comics, hoping for Sinister. Other than that, and we kind of just talked about it, but this movie is a fast movie. And it never dragged, but I thought each character, as well as they were, and to your point, Sunspot, I think he definitely could have used a little bit more juice, even to get a little bit more of him, and to see him kind of. I agree. Not even knowing the material, I thought when it came down to that final battle, I thought at that point he was still a little too nervous and shaky.
Yeah.
So I agree with you with that.
All right, cool. And again, like I really wanted to see that big bad. I mean, I wanted to see Mr. Sinister like walk out, and you're just like, oh, But we didn't get that shock factor. We didn't get that like, oh my god, like this is Mr. Sinister. That would have been awesome. That payoff would have been so huge. And I really wish they did that. So for me, like, again, Mike, I totally agree with you. The one thing I would have changed would be that bringing of Mr. Sinister, Nathaniel Essex, like onto like the show. I think he was too behind the scenes, and once that the shield kind of dissolved and everything like that, like I wanted him to be the big bad. I totally wanted, and I think they kind of dropped the ball on that a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I was expecting it. I was like, come on, give it to me.
Same.
But it never happened. I was like, oh
yeah.
So what scene in the movie did you like the most?
Oof. I thought the scene where we're first shown the, correct me if I'm wrong, the smiley people.
Yes.
I thought their first reveal was a good jump, where even though I probably, the jaded horror fan of me was like, oh, there's going to be a big scare here. But it worked because I don't remember. I know they're in the trailer, but I don't remember exactly, and once I saw them, like, oh yeah, I remember that from the trailer. But going in the movie, I kind of forgot about them. So to get that kind of like shock factor, just, to have the little horror nugget in that scene, I thought was great. But overall, and I kind of talked about it already, I really just liked seeing Magic go to town with Lockheed, taking it to Demon Bear. I thought Demon Bear looked great. People are talking about the effects, in their cons. For me, maybe I'm just easily entertained, but I thought the bear looked sick. And then seeing her, and I loved it when someone goes, oh, but that's Magic. And then her line, classic. I was waiting for her. I knew it was coming, but still, well, so am I. Like, I thought that was awesome. And you just see her, the action I thought was really cool. And seeing Lockheed, because at the end of the day, even if Lockheed was just a puppet the whole time, I'm like, that's an awesome little Easter egg. But then seeing Lockheed become like the actual little dragon and helping her. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. You need to watch it. If you have HBO Max, you need to watch it. I mean, it's been released for like a few months already. Like there's no excuse. I mean, hey, we're all comic book nerds. We should have watched it already. But yeah, I mean, the puppet turns into Lockheed, which is awesome.
Yeah, agreed.
And to your point, like I like the practical effects, and I like the CGI. I mean, it's not like we got like a smoke cloud that was Galactus.
Oh.
I mean, we got this bear that looked like a bear, even though it was in the shadows. I mean, it looked great. And again, if you've read the comic book, like you see that. I mean, it's what you had in your imagination. I mean, it's what Sienkiewicz drew. So I mean, it was great. Like overall, again, a fantastic movie, and I'm glad they did it. So Mike, would you recommend this movie to your friends, significant other?
So are we saying non-comic book people, or just in general?
Sure. I mean, you know what, comic book people and non-comic book people.
Sure.
Let's you take a two-step process on this. Let me hear what you got to say.
Sure. I think yes to both. I think comic book fans, and they're always saying that, there's one great about the Marvel movies is they're all the same. They're all, and no one's I love the Marvel movies, but I think for people that are always saying they want something different, I think it's perfect. To fans, I even though I haven't read the source material yet, knowing what I did going into it, I'd recommend it to people who know the New Mutants as well, know the original source material. I think it's a fun movie, and I don't go into these movies looking for Forrest Gump, Saving Private Ryan. You know, I just want a fun, enjoyable movie that's based on stuff that we love, and I think. For even if they end up not liking it, I'd say any comic book fan, Marvel and or DC, should check it out. And for non-comic book fans, yeah, because I've been telling those friends of mine that it's like a mix of X-Men, Breakfast Club, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, mixed in a light horror movie. And
I like it. I like it. So, what about your friends that love horror movies? Would you recommend this as a horror movie?
Yes, but not like I have one friend who's a huge horror fan, but also loves other film. But to my horror friends, I'd probably go in saying, you're not going to get Midsummer, you're not going to get The Witch, you're not going to get The Shining. But there's elements that it was in a good. This is a pro for me. It's a dark movie. And it's uneasy at points, and there's those scenes that what good horror movies do. They create that unease. They create that from their viewers. So I would recommend it to my hardcore horror fans, but maybe just that little preface it by saying it's not going to be it's not an R-rated horror film. It's not going to be super bloody, gory. But I think there's enough horror elements in there. I would recommend to my friends who are horror fans.
Cool. I'm glad. I mean, it sounds like you really enjoyed this movie.
I did. I really did.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, for me, like, I honestly, I wouldn't recommend it to any horror fans, personally, because like for me, like when I think of horror, I think of like Jason, Friday the 13th. I'm thinking Nightmare on Elm Street. I'm thinking of like Scream, just stuff like that, where you have these iconic figures, or even like Annabelle. For me, this was more of maybe more of a psychological kind of like fear, perhaps
more thriller, maybe.
Yeah, more of a thriller. But it was just kind of like I wish it would have gone all in with the horror, all in on the thrillerness. I guess if that's a word, I would rather than just go balls to the wall. Let's just do it,
Definitely. I do agree with that. Like, it's definitely, you're not going to get, Jason just hacking at, campers and whatnot. So people who are looking for a horror movie for the blood, the kills and stuff, maybe not recommend it to them to, agreed. But yeah, I like the points you just made there, kind of more that psychological, and they didn't go full, R-rated horror.
Yeah. There's a lot of good horror stuff out there that's PG-13.
True.
But again, for me, I would just recommend it to just casual fans, or just people just kind of wanting to get in to the genre. I think this is a good introduction of how like the CGI should work, how the characters should act, how relationships get built. And to your point, like before, how you made that movie, this New Mutants movie, made you want to read the book, and that's super important. And I think having a casual fan, or even just kind of somebody off the street, to say, hey, you know what, you'll enjoy this movie, and it'll make them curious to see what was the source material like, or what the series was like. Agreed.
I couldn't agree more.
And Danime, I'm glad you still watch this movie. That's great, and you should have HBO Max. I mean, come on.
It is weird because like when I have the Just Watch app, which is a neat app for people who want to know if a movie is available on any and all streaming services. So I kept as soon as New Mutants got out of theaters, I was like, okay, when is this going to be out? So I kept plugging in the Just Watch app, and then HBO Max, what? But once again, it's great to have that on there. I would have ended up buying it, because I was really interested in it. I like watching all these, we live in such a good time of comic book films, and this definitely was what I wanted. I got it with this movie.
Oh, that's great. Okay, so Mike, tell us a little bit about yourself, and why don't you let us know where we can find you?
Awesome. On YouTube here, Mike The Beast Bendtsen Comics, And on Instagram, the same thing. Twitter is Mike The Beast 92. But so I'm a huge comic fan. Growing up in the 90s, I was introduced to those great animated shows, Marvel and DC, and that's what really got me into wanting to read the books. And the characters that always, stuck out for me and who I loved right away, might, not come to a shock, but Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, but then also the FF and the X-Men. The FF are my favorite comic book team, but the X-Men, team-wise, they're probably right behind there in all of comics, those two teams. And it's just a huge Jack Kirby fan, and Kirby, Ditko from the 60s into Romita, and then into all the great Bronze Age guys. It's for me, it's the visuals is what drew me to it from the cartoon and then reading it in the comics. And so once again, I've been loving all this stuff we've gotten the last few years. And other than that, also, I'm a musician. I play guitar. Big wrestling fan and big Boston sports fan.
Nice.
And this last, I say one of the highlight, if not the highlight of the whole pandemic, is getting involved with this comic book community and again to meet people in person, through YouTube, through Instagram, and it's been such a huge part of surviving through these crazy times. This is such a great community, and it's been the support from the community has just been awesome. And I think every single one who has liked, commented, shared my videos, and I look forward to continue to put out content. Yeah,
I mean, seriously, the community is great, and I mean, I enjoy interacting with every single person out there. I mean, it's fantastic. And guys, like in the live chat or watching the rewind, sub Mike up. I have it over there in the live chat, and it's also in the description too. He is definitely an up and comer. He's putting some new content up, and he's going to be switching things up. So you need to stay tuned to this guy. I mean, he's going to have some great stuff coming up. I'm in the know. So you need to sub, and you need to get those notifications. That way you guys will know when he's coming up with new stuff. So you'll be prepared. And with that, thank you guys for watching. And as always, if you want to do it right, watch what you like.